Yeah, I can read this, yeah. So there it is. We're going to talk for a little bit about some of these principles, an introduction to this kind of work. When you go through something like this, the introduction to these kinds of principles, you know, we have to keep in mind that the way that we understand the historiography or the kind of the foundations depends very much on who we are, the trajectory that we have been on, and how we put certain things together. So you'd find other people also saying something differently, perhaps. I think the notion of the most powerful piece of knowledge when working with community, which so many of you know, is that you never know. And the never knowing causes one to listen. And learning to listen, being able to listen, is probably the most powerful tool that you can develop. And it's a tool which one continues to develop all of one's life. It's a never ending, because you may learn to listen with a particular group of people. You may learn the subtleties of the politics of a particular organization or a particular community, but you go working with another group of people and you're having to learn entirely over. Like our friend who's come from Scotland, doing community work over in Scotland. She knew people, she had relationships, she had certain access to information. She pops over here, and as she says, oh my God, I don't know anybody, where do I start? And that's the same thing, even within our own community. And even within the same organization, we could have worked, in an organization 10 years ago, but people have changed, the context has changed. So what we call community-based, or what I call community-based research these days, is really a coming together. It's a kind of an umbrella concept. It's a coming together of a lot of different discourses. My own roots in this go back to the 1970s, where we developed the concept of participatory research, coming out of work in the global South, coming out of work in Latin America, based on the kind of the scholarly work of Paulo Freire, Orlando Falls Borda, João Bosco Pinto, Carlos Rodriguez Brandão, people like Kamal Mustafa, Maria Elisa Swants in Tanzania, Rajesh Tandon in India. And we developed a participatory research network, which we worked quite actively to promote for some 20 years. And it was not within the academic world, it was within the NGO world. So community groups really liked it. The NGO world and all over the place, were picking it up. And as a result of that, the international development agencies were fast onto it, much long before anybody in the university was prepared to give it the time of day. So you began to see Robert Chambers' work, participatory rural appraisal, rapid rural appraisal, a variety of participatory planning processes that were supported even by agencies like the World Bank. Now, not unproblematically, but they did recognize that the notion that if you're interested in change at a grassroots level and you have no way of tapping into the knowledge of people living and working at that level, then you're not going. Your development plans and all of that aren't going to work very well. And so there was a whole period in the 70s and 80s where these approaches were very, very very popular and all over the places. And so funding agencies, including your your International Development Funding Agency here in Ireland, our own in Canada, and so many all over the world, were very active in promoting, these kinds of approaches. I would say in a modified way, because there was still that idea that somehow, government was in charge, and somehow, the countries, the donors, somehow, even though they didn't live there, they'd never lived there, never hoped to live there, somehow they knew better because they were richer than those people, and so they must have been doing something right. So there were some contradictions to it, but from a methodological point of view, there are a lot of development, a lot of sophistication. In the 1990s, you began to see, in sociology, in adult education, in health promotion, in some areas of sociology, people working on issues like HIV/AIDS, in indigenous studies, in disability studies, you began to see academics who were looking for methodologies which reflected more the organizing and the transformative, the empowerment kind of aspiration that they had for those communities or those groups of people, and so you began to get this kind of discourse entering into the university world. I taught my first course on community-based research in 1989 at a university in Canada, and that was probably the first course taught anywhere at any university. That's not that long ago. And I was asking about it. I thought I would have liked to have done it, in the 70s or the 80s. It took me a long time, 20 years. Within the university, as somebody was saying, who was it that was talking about the action research? I've used, yes. There's been a discourse, basically Kurt Lewin and the kind of the aftermath of World War II, particularly promoted by the Tavistock Institute, an idea about action research, which I think originally in the original kind of conception of it, was a fairly progressive idea, but for a variety of reasons, historic, organizational, it got captured more by the organizational development world. So more people doing, human resource development. It became a method most of the time applied to making changes within an organization and sort of stakeholder participation in change making within a university or a ministry or something like that. And so it didn't catch on quite so much. The concept, the term participatory action research, actually was coined by Orlando Falls Borda, a Colombian sociologist, and somewhere between 1977 1977 and 1982, he coined that because he'd been working from a concept which he called acción y investigación, in Spanish, action research, but in a very different way than the U.S. sociologists, much more action-oriented. And he came into contact with people, our own network, which was talking about investigación participativa. So he said, well, let's put participativa and acción and all of it together, and so he called it P parentheses A R, and sometimes you'll see it written that way. When you see it written that way, that's the coming from the Orlando Falls Borda, Anasir Rahman's another person associated with that. William Foote White, sociologist at Cornell, also around that same time, it's like the independent invention of agriculture in Egypt and the Mesopotamia. It's came up with the term, and he wrote a book on PAR in 1991, and because he because of who he was, big American publisher, everybody thought, oh, this is the first time it's ever been used. So there's a debate, even within, as you'd imagine, within all of this world, there are debates about whose version of all of this counts. In the 1990s, the person who is attributed to having the most influence on this, these emerging discourses, is Ernest Boyer. And Ernest Boyer is the fellow who, and you'll see him referred to in many of the organizations like CKI or community-based research or whatever, a lot, because he was president of a foundation, an influential foundation. He got quite a lot of, and he was quite articulate. He got quite well known. And so that notion of engaged scholarship, is an important one. Community-based research, that notion really has come out in the 2000s. And I don't know who the first person, there's a fellow called Strand, who I think of as kind of the authoritative person, in the definition. But I don't know who the first person was. But you'll find two in Canada. We use community-based research. I'll show you the definition we use in a second. And in the U.S., particularly in the field of health promotion, population health, all of that sort of stuff, you see community-based participatory research. CBPR is the thing that's promoted down there, or the concept that's used. But we use CBR. And what is CBR? I'll read this, and this is the one coming out of the book by Strand. Strand has got a book Josie Bass has published on community-based research. Community-based research involves research done by community groups with or without the involvement of a university. Important to remember that a lot of research, a lot of knowledge creation, most of it goes on without any reference to universities at all. And we certainly don't want, through this kind of work, to suggest that, in fact, community groups are not able to produce research or knowledge or valid ideas, unless they're in partnership with universities. Let's say, in relation to a university, CBR is a collaborative enterprise between academics and community members. CBR seeks to democratize knowledge creation by validating multiple sources of knowledge and promoting the use of multiple methods of discovery and dissemination. The goal of CBR is social action, broadly defined, and the purpose of achieving directly or indirectly social change and social justice. It's important, I think, those last little bits there, the purpose of CBR. Some of the approaches are content agnostic. Some of the definitions of research processes are, you could use it for, doing market research on a new car, or you could, use it for developing the best, color scheme for a new line of shoes. I'm not interested, and I don't think, people working in structures like CKI are interested, and those of us who are interested, certainly my colleague who wants to change the world, is not interested in those processes which are value agnostic, which are objective or value free. This kind of work, I think this kind of work, you need to be aware of your values. You don't have to be, exactly clear where it's all going or how it all can be implemented, but you do have to know. It's part of being able to do this work effectively is to know, where you stand and, where you're hoping to go to. So these are, kind of elements of community-based research. Again, other people, can write it in different ways, and there's no, exact way to do it. Let me say just one thing that I often forget. Community-based research is not a methodology. It's not a method of research. there are lots of ways of methods of doing research, which we'll come to a little bit in just a second. It's a description of a way of working, but it doesn't specify. There's no, some of you have been talking about doing surveys, some of you doing, autoethnographies, others have done, more collective, kinds of research. All of those are fine. There could be a place for any of those, but there also could be a place for that great, plethora of creative approaches that Darlene was talking about yesterday in the arts-based, arts-informed, research. And so we'll come back to that. But community-based research, when you say that, it doesn't preclude even quantitative approaches. You could make use of, there's nothing wrong with data per se. It's what people have used and the limitations of the way that's been used that's given it a bad name. Normally we think of community-based research as a partnership between professional researchers and community groups, integrating research and action for social justice. This comes to us from Randy Stoker, by the way. Randy is at the University of Wisconsin and is another very good source if you're looking for people who've written a lot, published a lot. He's a sociologist working out of Wisconsin. And that seeks and respects knowledge from all of the stakeholders, that where the research questions should be generated generally from the community. And this is the big, when we use, and I'll tell you one of the things, when we use the term engaged scholarship is actually silent on the question of where does the research question originate. Community-based research is not. Community-based research is, from its definitional origins, it is clear that the research question is coming from the community. And so that means that doesn't mean that community-based research is the only way to do something useful as a scholar. There's lots of useful things you can do as a scholar. But if you're going to work in this way, in a way that co-creates knowledge and co-creates knowledge in a way that builds the capacity of the group that one is working with to have more control over their own lives, that's what we're looking for. To have more control over the policies, the decision-making, the levers of power in their community, in their institution, in their country, whatever, then you need to do it to be more on this, it has to be done in this way. The researcher may be an initiator, may be an initiator or a collaborator or a consultant. There's or a facilitator, a lot of different roles that the researcher may play and have played. And I'm sure you've all got examples of that. There's no, kind of magic role that one has to play. The project may be, the community group itself may run the whole thing, and you're just invited in, to play your part, or you may jointly, it may be, co-run, and you work together on that thing. Students' involvement, all kinds of students' involvement may be providing, for example, we've got a number of, some of the most useful student involvement in community-based research in Victoria is around providing lit reviews for organizations. If there's an organization working on injection drug use and they want to know, what the 4 best practices are to support people who are involved in injection drug use to be able to, to seek and get some health support. It's great to have a student, a graduate student, do a lit review as part of a larger project. But there's a lot of other ways that students can be used, and funders may or may not. It depends on the context. But there are cases where the funders themselves. So the key in all of this. The key in all is the partnership bit. That lies at the heart of this, the ability to work together. So these are basically, if I would have taken from each of what you said, those of you who are working in community, you would have generated something that looks just like this. You've already said this. I'm just reiterating what other people have said, but in fact, each of you have said this right here in this room. And that that an effective partnership is, mutual understanding and respect, that it's around trust. And as we all know, trust is not something that, that you do on a sort of a 3-month project or probably even a 1-year project. Trust is something that's built up over years, and in some cases, we're talking about relationships that are more or less ongoing, for the duration of one's life. The duration of one's life. Not always the case. That there's that there are benefits. Obviously, there have to be benefits to the community group, community organization. Otherwise, there's no point. They're not going to be there. But they're also, they have to negotiate benefits. The academic also has to survive, also has to have a career. They also have to pay the rent. So something has to come back, and that needs to be clear. We really recommend, discussing these issues of power. What are you looking at for this research? At the beginning. At the beginning, work it out. Depending on how large or complex it is, you may need a formal written agreement. It may take you a couple of days. I know cases where it's taken, a couple of years actually to work out, who's going to benefit, how it's going to work. If there's a conflict, who do you go to? Who owns the property rights? Who can publish? Whose names need to be on what kind of thing? What sort of ethics need to be taken into account? All of those things it's much better to take up at the beginning than halfway through when you get in a big fight about something, or let's say the person who you negotiated the original relationship with, has another job and you're left with somebody new and they don't see things the same way. There are templates for community agreements, research agreements that you can find on, for example, the website CCPH, Community Campus Partnerships for Health.org. They have a number of very good templates, but if you look around, you'll find them. Obviously, these are financial transparency. Woo, nothing ruins a relationship worse than secrets about the money. Joint accountability. There is an accountability. We have an accountability to our academic, leaders, but it has to be jointly accountable. There are, the board of the organization or the city council or whoever else. But it has to be joint. The co-management. It's sometimes the community group thinks, oh well, you're the researcher, you're paid to do the research. You do the research, and and just tell us what to do. But in fact, then you miss out because the gains, some of the biggest gains in doing this work are learning to represent knowledge in ways that an academic might not have the experience to do. So unless the thing is co-managed, you won't be able to do it. Obviously, the co-production of the results. Co-production of the results. If you think about the sort of the vast majority of kind of research that's done in other ways than this sort of paradigm, where do you get where do the questions come? Questions come from conversations we've had with other scholars. Maybe you've read it in a journal, or maybe you went to a conference last year and there was a keynote speaker and you said, oh, I'm going to do some research like that. I want to do it about this, that, and the other thing. You think up the questions. You think up, got to get some data. So, there's maybe that, that adult literacy class. I'll get them to fill in some forms. They fill in the forms. You take that data, you analyze that data, and you write up your paper. And your paper, in fact, is accepted in a journal because it's in the same line of a number of other researchers, and suddenly you're part of an academic discourse on literacy. But if you want to, if you think about each of those steps, how much more powerful, how many more insights you've had into how literacy is really negotiated, by adults, all of the choices that they have to make, women in particular, to go in for, increasing the reading and writing skills. And you've got data, and if you involve, them in trying to make sense of the data, it's going to be it's a much richer, a much more powerful piece of research. So the object behind this is, what we're saying is that this kind of research, not only does it have the potential of being a tool for organizing, for what we call empowerment, for building people's confidence, for recognizing themselves as not isolated, but it also has the potential for creating better theory, because it's theory based in the lives and the knowledge and the experience of people, and not just kind of floating around at the top. Obviously, shared celebration of success. So we were talking last night in the group yesterday about how do we all keep going, and this work that we all do, and each of you in all of your different organizations, I'm sure that you do that anyway, but the importance of celebrating every little thing, every step, giving visibility to each and every person who accomplishes something. You made it through that, through that certificate, you made it through that workshop, 3 weeks together, celebrate it, have a party, make up some certificates, invite the friends and families, put on a performance, whatever it is. That stuff is so very important. And I must say that as in the research community, fun around research presentations is almost the last thing that anybody thinks of. How many of you would actually go to a research conference, to have a good time? Nobody. You're going to go to a piece of theater. You're going to go to the pub and hear some new musicians you haven't heard. You're going to go to this local literary festival here in Galway. You're going to participate in a poet's circle. There's all kinds of things you're going to do for fun, but you're not going to go to an academic conference, because those people who all love to have fun themselves have created a culture where fun has been just squeezed out of them. And if there's any fun left, as soon as you see anybody laughing, that's not a serious scholar in there, so we move right on. Move right on, where everybody's bolted to their seats and their eyes are fixed straight ahead. That's the academic. Well, this isn't that field. If you're attracted, by the way, you're a very shy person, you don't want to be, interacting too much, those are great places to go. And that's a lot of academics are like that. But if you're the kind of person, it looks like many of you are here, who actually, don't feel that you're being a traitor, that if you're actually enjoying your work or enjoying being with people, then this community-based research has a lot to offer it. So in terms of the managing, the designing, and the sorting out of the partnership, which is really the part of this which I think takes the most thought, because there's a lot of work on. You can buy books, you can get YouTubes and all kinds of things on methodological approaches, but there's not as much on the development or the management of the partnership itself. So a few principles around there. So when you're doing this, you need to think about what kind of a partnership are you working with? Is it a really broad-based, or a multi-sector, or a narrow, or a single sector, or a single organization? Because depending on what kind of an organization it is, your management, the team that you're going to need to put together to implement this or to work through it is going to be different. Is this something that you're putting together? You're organizing a festival, so it's got 3 months. Here we all are. We're going to do a festival on poetry and social action. And so we're just going to pull, those of you at this end of the room, let's just throw ourselves together. It's an ad hoc committee, do the best we can. And there are lots of situations that's fine. But if you've got funding, if you've got serious buy-in from the community groups and their responsible structures, then you really need to be thinking of an ongoing relationship, and that's going to have implications for your partnership development. It's really important to spend some time on the governance of the project. Governance sounds like, oh my God, that sounds like the government, or getting away from all that. But when we talk about governance, it's just the managing, or how are you going to work together? Because if you can get that clear at the beginning, it makes everything flow, so much easily. And there will be times, as Darlene said, and we all know, where things just go completely kablooey. All of the best laid plans, all kinds of reasons, real life intrudes, into these processes. And if you don't have a governance, a co-governance structure that you've invested a bit of time in each other, so you know each other well enough so you can move, you'll find it hard to survive those difficult times. Obviously resources depend on resources, and it may be that you've got a little bit of money, but you realize to do this well, you really should postpone getting started, because there's going to be a call for certain kind of money, 3 months' time. Let's put a proposal, let's get the proper funding that we need. So, it is worth thinking about. If you're on the university side, you're approached by a community group, you may have certain resources. You may have some students who you can put to the task, but you may not have any academic staff who could provide overview, because they're all busy with something else. So in order to get their time, that means funding, in order to buy some of their time. And you may not have any funding right now, but you do know that there's a call coming up from somewhere. So these are all things that, practical things that you need to think about. When you want to change the world, it's political. It may be political within your university. It may be political within your county government. It may be political within a national context, an Irish context. It may be political within the European kind of research and science community, the funding and policy community. But there are politics involved, and it's important to know who the allies are. Where some of this stuff might land, because if you're working, whatever you're working on issues of homelessness, or you're working on issues of different opportunities for youth, or you're working on issues of approaches to waste management, or approaches to safety of women and girls. There are different; those all float into to different policy worlds and different political worlds, and there's a politics, behind each of those questions. And there are people in political parties or not who have stakes in a lot of these issues. So it is important to talk with your partners to try and get a sense of sort of the conjuncture. The political conjuncture of this particular issue. It's because it's understanding that will allow you, to shape your work in a way that'll have the most influence. Champions are great. I think one of the things that CKI appears to have done, thanks to the work of Lorraine and Anne and Mary, and you have identified and created champions amongst some of the the philanthropic organizations, amongst important university leaders, such as the president, and the house training of presidents is an art, and not to be undertaken lightly. And we haven't written the book yet about that, but Lorraine's going to do that for us. Yeah. But finding a champion of this for this kind of work, and you probably have champions, national champions. And if any of you, those of you who are involved in the various kind of local actions that you're talking about, you have or you should have somebody, outside of your own immediate circles and outside of the kind of this research partnership, who thinks that the kind of work that you're doing, either the cause or your partnership or you as a person, are really important, and they're people that you need to keep keep them apprised of what's going on. And I think that's it.